Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and we got another banger video for you guys today. This time, we're going to be talking about October champions. So, apparently, they released a new list of champions, as well as some interesting details. I know a lot of people were concerned about Timid's consistency, his uses, his case uses, and about basically if this champion is worth going for. And one of the things I said in my breakdown video for him was about understanding what his partner does, and we're going to be able to see that later on in this video. So definitely stay tuned for it. With that being said, let's get right into it. So we do have a couple comments, uncommon, excuse me, a couple epics, and of course some legendaries we're going to be looking into. The first one is Branch Weaver. This is an uncommon spirit champion that's a support type in the Sylvan Watchers faction. So the newest faction, the one that doesn't have the most going for it, it's not too bad. I don't mind them actually adding a little bit more to that faction in general. But I will say that we need more damage deals. We don't need more supports. Anyways, I digress. It's an uncommon, so I don't know what to expect from it. His first ability is going to be Attack 1. Enemy places an increased speed buff on the ally with the highest turn meter, except this champion for 1 turn. Not bad, but I still feel like if it's conditional, so it's like really, really low tier in terms of like value there. I think that if I were them, I would have just said increase turn meter to all allies. That would have made this guy really, really good. Or increase speed to all allies, or at least maybe himself and an ally. That would be a little bit better. But this is sort of unfortunate there. His next ability is going to be Dagger Leaf, which is attacks all enemies, has a 25% chance of placing a decreased speed buff on all enemies for 2 turns. This can be booked down to a 3-turn cooldown, and then its chances can be increased to a 35, 50% chance. That's alright. I mean, to be honest with you, like, we don't really expect much from uncommon, so there may be some small case value in that when it comes to speed, increased speed and decreased speed, but to be honest with you, I think this is a champion that's going to be very, very easily oversought. And, you know, not really, like, looked upon too heavily. So, I think that kind of matches with his rarity for the most part, you know. Uncommons are very, very niche and few. I think the only one I can think of that, like, stands the test of time is, like, Armiger. So, you know, maybe this one doesn't do too well. Let me see here. Neldor, the Epic. He's going to be a Force champion for High Elves. Interesting. He's going to be an attack-type champion. His A1 attacks three times at random. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. 3 times at random... but it has a freeze that can have a chance of up to 40%. When I think about this, I think of Fire Knight, believe it or not. We use champions like Ganut, who has a triple A1 that also applies as a freeze if it doesn't have any ability to reduce turn meter, right? Which intrinsically is turn meter reduction for someone like the Fire Knight hard stage. Would this guy be a complementary champion for that? I will say that even with a 40% chance, the likelihood of him being used is probably pretty low. Although the 3 times at random becomes less of an issue because it's only Fire Knight you're hitting anyway, so you're going to randomly hit him 3 times no matter what. So, not an issue there, but to be honest with you, I think the A1 might be a bit of a diffie because you are going to need to get him to the boss, which means you got a couple waves in front of you, and I don't see him getting there like that, you know. His A2, though, is Dancing Razor. It attacks 1 enemy 4 times, okay, so it's a 4-hitter. Still giving value to Fire Knight, you know, shields got to go down, right? The first and the second hit have a 50% chance to place a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Nice. The third and the fourth hit have a chance of decreasing accuracy. So, this one is interesting because it's a 4-hitter. Depending on the multipliers, that could be very exciting. It can be booked up to a 75% chance when fully booked for the 50%ers. That's not too bad for a debuff chance, but it's also not, like, practically guaranteed, so that's a little rough. If it's not 100%, it's 50-50 at the end of the day. That's the way I look at it. Decreased accuracy. Where's decreased accuracy valuable at? Well, this is a single target hit, so I guess there are some case uses in boss areas, like, for example, Hydra, you know, maybe reducing the accuracy of Mischief Head, which is the main one you care about. Decreased attack is also valuable across the board for all the Hydra heads. He is a attack type champion, so unless his multipliers are significant, I don't see that being the case, but I'm just giving an example. You know, you gotta work with what you got, right? Now, on the offhand, though, I do think that decreased accuracy may have some value in maybe something like IT, so that might be pretty interesting there. But, you know, kind of lackluster. I think maybe if it was an attack all enemies, maybe that'd be kind of cool. That'd be unique, and that might actually be a little bit too strong. I don't know. When it is fully booked, though, it will be down to a 3-turn cooldown, so that's not too bad. So there could be some consistency there, and that's a good thing for epics, right? Consistency is what makes them relevant, in my opinion. His A3, though, is a Chromatic Cross. That's a cool name for it. Attacks all enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 30 decreased speed debuff, so another decreased speed champion. 50% can be booked up to a 75% chance on a 4-turn cooldown when fully booked. Not too bad. The chance land rate, like I said, is not 100%, so I don't view that too highly. Decreased speed's also valuable in something like IT, so there might be some value there. Same with Hydra, 2 key areas I can think of around the rip. Or in general, if we're looking at it from like maybe a PvP standpoint, freezing champions is never bad. Or decreased attack, decreased accuracy is never bad. Decreased speed's never bad. You know what I mean? It doesn't hurt. You got to be aware, though, that we do live in a polymorph meta, so that might be a little bit of a negative for him more than a positive. But we'll see. We'll see. We have to plug and play, right? Now, he also gets a heal by 30% of the damage that he deals. So, technically, he has a way of providing himself some self-sustain, which is kind of cool. That's not too bad. His Cold-Blooded Drive, which is a passive. Epics having a passive is interesting. Some of the better well-known epics, like Geomancer, for example, has one of the best passives in the game. It's really dope. That's what makes him relevant, what makes him a monster, what's making him a legendary in an epic skin. So hopefully this guy's pretty good. Whenever an ally places a freeze debuff, this champion has a 30% chance to attack the target with their default skill. This now has some value in terms of plug and playing, maybe in a Fire Knight tournament team, or a Fire Knight type team, right? Particularly for the hard dungeon side. Because G-Nut typically can land his freeze, right? So, as he's doing that, you have a chance to get Neldor to also apply that freeze. Which means that the turn meter reduction is even better. Now, when we start looking at it like this, one of the key components that I like to look for in Fire Knight hard teams is decreased speed. He has that. Having freeze, he has that. And then kind of like a pseudo ally attack with that function now makes him a lot more relevant. I actually like this. You know what? Maybe if I get my hands on a Neldor, we might try to see if we can plug and play him into a Fire Knight team. What do you guys think? Now, it is a chance proc, so that is something to kind of be aware of. You know, at the end of the day, it's not 100% guaranteed, as with a lot of his stuff in his kit. I do think that even with the chance of being 40% his freeze land rate is pretty low, you are kind of playing more towards the fact that you're going to be able to hit him multiple times, less so much the chance land rating. So, like, there's pros and cons to this, but I would like to see it in application. That's an interesting dynamic. I think that would be really, really cool to see him in. Interesting epic. I would say that he's not overpowered by any means or anything like that, but not bad, not bad. That's an interesting. It's a unique concept for the passive. The passive kind of sold me a little bit there. All right, back down to the uncommon range. We're gonna have Glint Spear. It's an uncommon magic attack type champion for the Sylvan Watchers. Finally, we got some there. Attacks when enemy places an extra hit if the target is under a weaken debuff. That weaken is interesting. Places an extra target, extra hit. So I'm assuming that she's gonna come with, or he's gonna come with, a weaken, which is what I'm seeing here on the A2. Attacks when an enemy has a 50% chance of placing a 15% weaken, which can be booked up to a 75% on a 3-turn cooldown. This is kind of on the weaker side. It's a lesser weaken, I believe. I'm not entirely sure. I have to double check that one, but 3-turn cooldown's good. 2-turn duration, so it means you have a 1-turn downtime, and then having a chance to place an extra hit. I don't expect this to be like high multipliers, anything ridiculously out there, but you know, if you're working with like minimal champions and you need to get a little bit of progress, maybe getting some extra keys done during Civil Watchers, you know, get some perception materials or whatever you can, right? You may have some value here, but magic champion attack, nothing out of the normal there. It's just an uncommon, so we're not really too much, you know, bothered by that. Now we're on to the big boys. We got legendaries in the house. This one's a void one for the Ogren tribes. You know what? I did look at this recently, and I felt like Ogrens as a whole, I do think that that's going to be an interesting concept to kind of play with, right? Like, you might have a pretty cool dynamic with Ogrens not having like a lot of love lately. Like, that's the way I kind of look at it. Like, Ogrens as a whole, like when you look at their roster, are one of the tribes, if not pretty close to the bottom end side when it comes to having like a lot of legendary. So like I think that like adding more to them is actually really, really cool. This one is an HP type champion, void, so that automatically makes their value go up tremendously because you know they're not affinity different, they're neutral to everything. His A1 is an attack one enemy has a 30% chance of decreasing the cooldown of a random skill of the ally with the highest turn meter. Interesting. Accept this champion by 1 turn. When fully booked, that is a 50% chance. That's a pretty good gamble. We look at 10% and higher as like decent chances. It's either super good or super bad, depending on what type of experience you've been having. But 50% chances on the higher side for an A1 ability, that's actually pretty significant. His second ability, which is Slayer's Roar, has an attack all enemies. That's good. Places an increased attack buff and an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. The only champion that I know that does both of those buffs within one ability that I could think of right off the rip is someone like Mithrala, which she uses her A2. So it's nice to see another champion that could do something like this. It is a 2-turn duration. It also heals all allies by 20% of this champion's maximum HP. That's huge. So not only does it give you buffs, It also heals you, but it's a heal that can scale off of this champion, who is an HP-based champion already. That stonks. That's very, very big. That's a very good skill already, just right off the rip. No conditionals, nothing else. It's just straight up solid for output in terms of getting your champions enabled. It does damage, it buffs, it heals. This is literally all abilities inside one. That's awesome. And then it's also on a 3-turn cooldown, so this is actually very consistent for an ability to kind of constantly be activated. Increased attacks in terms of damage, or increased damage in general from the books as well. That's a solid A2. All right, his A3, Mercy of the Oasis. Revives all dead allies with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, and then places a shield buff on all revived allies for 2 turns, equal to 20% of this champion's maximum HP. Another ability that scales off of his HP, which is good. It's a revive, great. And then gives them turn meter, great. And then places a shield buff on all revived allies, great. And it can be booked down from not a 6-turn, 5-turn, 4-turn cooldown. It's a little bit on the higher side. It's a little bit on the higher side, but for what you get, though, you give them health, you give them the revive, you give them a shield so they can try to survive a hit a little bit better. And then being able to give them that shield that scales off of this champion's HP means that it's a lot more exponentially higher, right? So, like, a revive like this could technically give your champion enough breathing room to get back into the game. That's dope. That is very, very dope. On a 14 cooldown, it's a little bit of a rough cooldown period, but with that shield, that might be the thing that turns the tides of this one being a little bit more valuable. I like this champion so far, man. I can't deny it. Critical Juncture, which is his passive, has a 50% chance of decreasing all of an ally's cooldowns, all of an ally's skill cooldowns, wow, by 1 turn whenever they're revived. Wow. That's what? And then when it's booked, it has a 60-70% chance instead? Oh my goodness. So being able to, on a 70% chance, means it's a lot more likely to happen. Whenever you do revive it, so you're taking a negative experience on your champion and then turning into, like, all right, maybe you're playing the battle of attrition and the fight's going on and you blew your kit and it wasn't enough to fully lock them out and they end up getting killed for it. And then you have the revive, which basically has a chance of saying, yo, run it back. And you can actually, like, get a full slam down. Imagine giving that to someone like Georgette, for example, or someone who is a significantly impactful champion, and giving them basically their entire kit back. That's a big deal. That's a very, very big deal. I like this champion. For an Ogren, that is such an enabler. Is the best way I could say it. This champion is like the definition of a support enabler. Strong, good setup. Basically, a way to keep the champions going with revives and a shield to keep them from dying again. And then having an Aura that can scale your HP up on the higher end side. I think 30 is the average. I think the higher end side might be a little bit more than that. I've seen some champions with like 35 in specific areas and whatnot. But 33% is a solid Aura for champions to use off of a champion that scales off of HP. This is a very cohesive kit. This kit has a lot of synergy in itself. When you tether together with other champions, it's even more exponential. This champion is a W. If you get your hands on a Bellatar, that's going to be awesome. That's going to be awesome. I like that champion. That's a good one. I seen this one. This was the one that stood out to a lot of people when they were showing the showcase. We did a reaction to it. They did a big like showcase of all the different champions that are going to be coming up without like really showcasing them. They just kind of give you like a little preview. And this the Crocodile, this is going to be a really, really cool one to see. I hope he's going to be awesome to use. This is a part of the Lizardman tribe. Krok'mar the Devourer. Spirit, HP type champion, so we're getting more HP champions. This one looks like it's going to be a little bit more of an offensive style type champion, so you're going to be looking to do damage and whatnot is what I'm assuming. Let's see though. Meat Splitter. Attacks all enemies one time if the first attack is critical. That's something you can manipulate in terms of your build. So you basically are going to hit one person, then hit two, like everybody after that. Guaranteed. And then his entire booking system for the A1 is just straight damage. Makes sense. It's a lot of output, especially if he's got high multipliers. That's going to be really cool to see. His Gnashing Bog, which is his A2, is going to attack all enemies, places a shield buff on this champion for 2 turns, equal to 20% of the damage inflicted. So he gives himself a shield based on the damage he does. It's a little selfish, but it's a great way to keep himself going. You know, pretty much a lot of times you're playing for you're using your support to play for that particular damage dealer that you have, whether that's in PvP or maybe even in other content like Clan Boss or whatever the case may be. Like you're always playing your support champions to benefit your damage dealers, right? And basically he's a damage dealer that's still playing for himself, which is awesome. It also heals this champion by 10% of their max HP for each crit hit, something you can manipulate. Outside of the weak affinity aspect of this thing still has the chance of being able to go the distance. Damage will scale up as you book them, as well as it bringing it down from a 4-turn cooldown to a 3-turn cooldown. Interesting, not too bad. I think both of these abilities so far, they're cool. Nothing crazy substantial to worry about unless they have high multipliers. If they're high multipliers, then this champion's going to be a problem. Apex Predator, which is his A3, gives himself a increased crit rate, increased crit damage on all allies for 3 turns. That's a big deal. Wow. So not only does he get increased crit rate to himself, increased crit damage to himself, but he also buffs all allies as a part of it. And then grants him an extra turn, so you can set up into this. That's interesting. And it's a 6-turn cooldown. That's a little bit on the higher side, but it can be booked down to a 4-turn cooldown. Not bad. The cooldown's a little bit on the higher side. I think 3 turns might have been a little too OP, maybe, because you can cycle into his other abilities coming back up. Like, instead of this being considered like a 3-turn cooldown, you might as well consider that like a 2-turn cooldown because of A3 into being able to have it again. So I could see that. I could see why they have it the way they do. Actually, I think that's actually how they have it set up. When it's booked, it's a 3-turn cooldown, right? So this basically automatically takes it down an extra notch for a free turn. So that's actually kind of nasty. That notching bug might actually be a lot more relevant than we're giving it credit for. Not bad at all, not bad at all. Being able to give the allies, so he's less selfish here, but he's still strong regardless because he's also able to apply it to himself is very, very cool. Nice kit, nice kit, nice kit. Voracious Hunger, which is his passive, is going to be whenever this champion attacks, decreases the target's attack or defense by 5%. Wow. As well as accuracy or resistance by 5%. Wow. Depending on which stat is the highest. Stacks up to 30%. Who has a decreased defense or decreased stat type ability or passive that makes them substantial? The first one I can think of is Harama's A2, which is a monster of an ability. So him being able to do that to not only their defense, but their attack, as well as accuracy or resistance, depending on where they're at. So you hit a Yumiko. You know, we just recently got one. A little flex, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. Being able to use Yumiko, or use this against Yumiko, means that she's less likely to provide too much of a control on you, in terms of lockout if you're going to the battle of attrition. Resistance, maybe you can bring down the resistance of a champion so that you can CC them a little well. I think of like UDK, for example, who's recently gone up in resurgence for resist type builds. Attack or defense, maybe you're going against that Leo or some other champion and it's a battle of attrition still going on and you're trying to bring them down. Very interesting kid. I think the big one is the defense stuff for sure. That's another one. Scaling up to 30% reduction is that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. So I'm very excited to see how this is going to play out. But this is a champion to keep a lookout for. I think the icing on the cake is that this guy has decent multipliers on his A2 and his A1. If they are, this is going to be a solid champion, and it's going to be one to watch out for. Timid the Fool. We already talked about him. If you want to see it, go watch my other video. No, for real. We did a big breakdown for him and our rationale as to why we're going for the fusion. Definitely take a look at him, see what you got, and let me know what you guys think if you're going to go for the fusion or not. Anyways, we're going to keep moving. The epic void of the next turn here is going to be Ostrox Boneglaive. It's a support undead horde. Okay, cool. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% or 70% chance of transferring one random debuff from this champion to the target. Interesting. That's going to be booked up to 100%, so it's always going to try to transfer a random target. I think you're going to need some accuracy with this ability. Also heals the ally with the lowest HP by 10% of this champion's max HP. So a heal that's built into it while also giving like a pseudo cleanse for himself. It's a little selfish for himself, but it's still pretty cool. Unique kit, and he's a void champion, so he's never going to weak hit. Awesome. Awesome. I like that extra heal. The heal's kind of like a little bit of an added flavor to this champion. Spinal Surge. That sounds nasty. Attacks all enemies. If 3 or fewer enemies are alive, has a 75% chance of placing a block buff debuff on each enemy for 2 turns. If it's 4 or more enemies alive, has a 75% chance of placing a block buff debuff on each enemy for 3 turns. This screams Hydra, because the way I understand it, that decapitated head isn't considered a fewer enemy or a dead enemy or anything like that, so it's still technically an existing enemy that exists within the pocket, so you'll always be at 4 or more, I believe, the way I understand it. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments below. I'll definitely take feedback on that one, but I believe that he will always place a 75% chance, which can be booked up to 100% chance for 3 turns instead of the 2 turns there. I think in external areas like maybe PvP or something like that, you'll be more conditional to like the 3, depending on the terrain of the fight, on a 3-turn cooldown. Very interesting champion, very solid. This might be a good contribution towards Hydra content. I could see right off the rip. That's the first thing I thought of when I saw that. His Depth Perception, which is his A3, is going to be remove 1 random debuff from all allies. Great. And place a 50% increased accuracy buff on them for 2 turns. Great. It's a 6-turn cooldown. That's kind of bad. but it can be booked down to a 4-turn cooldown. That's kind of good. Not too bad, not too bad. I think that's a solid kit. Being able to heal, cleanse, and then provide some control in the aspect of block bust makes this a very, very formidable Hydra champion. Someone that, like, maybe you do have enough damage, but you're lacking in sustain in a little bit. He may provide that as being one of your direct block buff type champions too. Oh, Faction Wars as well. That's something that I can, I can attest to. Being able to provide heals for your undead champions. That's something that I think undead sometimes struggles with unless you have, like, key component champions like Golgarab for the epic homies, or for the legendary side, maybe like a Siphi. But, we still don't have Siphi, so we don't talk about that. His aura also provides increased accuracy in all battles by 40, so that's a great contribution to any type of content, and it makes him actually a well-rounded champion. This is a W. We got some good champions coming out here. Oh my goodness, I like this. I like this. Kaj of the Ride. This is the one I'm looking forward to the most. This is what's going to define whether or not we consider Timid to have a little bit more potency in his value, or if he's going to be considered a little bit more lackluster. So, she's a legendary spirit champion that's also part of the Bannerlords. It makes sense, right? Got to be partnered up with the right champion. Support type champion. Interesting. So, we have a double support. Attacks one enemy with Firecracker. Heals this champion by 10% of their maximum HP. Okay. If any Timids, I like how they say, if any Timids are on the same team, heals all of them by the same amount. Huge sustain. 10% of their maximum HP. And you can scale the HP and the damage up based off of books. Not too bad. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Back with a bang. I like the way they name these abilities. Revives all dead allies with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, then places an increased crit rate, increased crit damage buff on them for 2 turns. That's a lot going on right there. If Timid the Fool is on the same team and dead, revives them with full HP and full turn meter. So there's a difference between being 100% turn meter and full turn meter. Full turn meter means that they go next. 100% turn meter means that there's still a chance that because the turn meter of other players, maybe even the enemy players, are over 100%, maybe they're at 110, 115, whatever you want to call it, they're going to get their turns before that. Like someone like Sun Wukong is 100% turn meter. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that he's going to go next. That means he's going to be in the list a lot sooner than champions that are, below 100%, right? But with that being said, giving them full turn meter means that Timid is going next, no matter what, which may be an impactful aspect to it when you're tethering it with, like, decreasing duration buffs, or maybe you're getting that increase buff that he has on his A3 with the fear to give you a little bit more breathing room. Maybe there's some attributes there, right? And then you got to remember, he also has some extra control because Kaja's on the team too, so there might be some value there, right? If Timid the Fool is on the same team and alive, it resets the cooldown and instantly activates their Kegs of Dread skill. Oh my god, imagine saying that 3 times. I don't know why I said that. I feel like I said that before. It's a 6-turn cooldown, but it is bookable down to a 4-turn cooldown. So, not too bad. A little bit on the higher side for cooldowns. I think we generally go by the rule of 3. 3 is good. Anything below that's even greater. But solid. I think the Timid aspect is going to be an interesting dynamic. If he's alive, you get to cooking. If he's dead, you get to cooking. You know what I mean? And it's on an A2, so which is really, really cool. I find that very interesting. The A3, Royal Flush, that's very on par with, like, the whole Carnival aspect, of the characters. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 20%. W. We like turn meter. Also removes 2 random debuffs from each ally. W. A cleanser and a turn meter booster. A lot of times when you're fighting against specific champions, I'll give you a perfect example. Turn meter boosting into a Tormund, the Dwarf Void, automatically puts you in a place where you're likely to get, CC'd by freeze, because he punishes turn meter boosters. Well, she turn meter boosts, and then he activates in the ways I'm understanding. So turn meter boost into the freeze, but then she also removes the cooldowns. That might, I have to see it in application, but that might be an address to being able to turn meter boost without the restriction of Tormund compromising you. Very, very cool. If Timid the Fool is on the same team, removes all debuffs from all allies. Oh my god. Forget it. If you got Timid, then you're full clean. Full board is wiped. And then there's even more. Places a block debuff on all allies for 1 turn. Wow. This champion says, yo, we're going to get our turn. We're not going to get CC'd. Let's make sure that happens, right? It's on a 5-turn cooldown. It gets booked down to a 3-turn cooldown, so that's a W. The 1-turn duration is a little unfortunate, but that might be all you need just to get in there. I'm not gonna lie. Being able to cleanse and then inject your team back into it, and they can't be CC'd, even if they aren't ahead of the enemy after the turn meter boost, still makes it so that they're not controllable with that block debuff, and that's huge. This is a solid champion, man, when it comes to just being another enabler, in a sense, right? Dynamic Duo. So this is the passive for Kaja that hopefully is going to have some synergy with Timid. All turn meter reduction effects are decreased by 50% when used against this champion. Interesting. If Timid the Fool is on the same team, this champion is immune to turn meter reduction effects. Forget your Lysandra. Forget your High Katoon, depending on where you're at in the game. Who else does turn meter reduction? I mean, there's a plethora of them that do not care about it. That's a solid passive. But Timid does have to be in this. That's 2 of the 4 slots, so is it worth it is the question. If an enemy tries to decrease this champion's turn meter when Timid the Fool is on the same team, fills this champion's turn meter by the same percentage instead. So instead of punishing us, you're actually helping us when Timid's on the team. That's stonks right there. That's actually kind of dangerous if you're playing against that. And then, of course, as always, the aura is going to have an increased ally speed in all battles by 19%. Always a W. That's pretty much the standard. If you go higher and above that, then you have a little bit more of a stronger potency. But 19 is pretty much a good standard base percentage for increased ally speed. So go fast, go ham, go home, and let Timid reign supreme with her. I like the synergy. There's a lot of play into this. There's a lot of aspects behind being able to relinquish yourself from control factors that are currently inside the meta, which makes this a formidable champion. Especially when paired with Timid. I do think this is very cool. I do think that we still need to see some extra information on both of the champions to kind of validify or give validity to whether or not they're going to be value. But I do think that these are going to be some solid champions. I like their synergy. I think that's what gives them some uniqueness when it comes to partner champions. Their synergy is solid. I don't think it's above top tier. I don't think it's on the level of Mariska Terrace. But I do think that in general, the way that these champions are going, they're very, very solid champions. I like the way they look. Not bad. Base form, Night Queen Krixia. We have 2 forms that we're going to look into here. This is the associative, or if you've been paying attention to like a lot of the promos for Lady Mikage, you're going to see Krixia right beside her. Attacks one enemy. This is her base form. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each it has a 50% chance of increasing the duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn. Valuable. It is bookable to have an extra ignore resistance. Doesn't have an increased chance, but ignore percent resistance, which is unique to mythical champions. This is one of the more recent things that comes with the mythic champions. Instead of it being chance increase rate, it's going to be just resistance ignored. So that's kind of cool. Doom Lantern plays a 50% decreased resistance debuff, interesting, and a block buffs debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Where do we see value with block buffs? The first one I think of is Hydra. Decreased resistance, also good in Hydra, believe it or not. We don't want to get too debuff heavy because then we miss out on being able to apply some extra debuffs that we do care about. Decrease speed, for example, defense, decrease weaken. You know, the debuff bar does fill up. You're not going to have too much more space for anything. So the decreased resistance is a little interesting. It also is an ignore resistance on a 4-turn cooldown. Bookable down to a 3-turn cooldown. That's not too bad. Also decreases each target's turn meter by 20%. This does not have value in Hydra, so that's less of a value there. But in other areas, in other fighting terrain environments, that might have some value to give you a little bit more time to get into the fight a little bit faster, right? Deathly Apparition. What a dope name. Attacks all enemies, removes all buffs from all allies, or all enemies, excuse me. So it's a strip. It has a chance for weak hit because it attacks all enemies, removes all buffs from all enemies. So there's a chance to weak hit, so magic stonks to the moon, but force is down bad. And a lot of our enemies are force-based when it comes to PvP meta. Also increases the cooldown of all enemy skills by 3 turns. Lockout? Stripper and a lockout? What? It's a 5-turn cooldown, bookable down to a 4-turn cooldown. That stonks. This is a champion. Not only being able to remove buffs, great. It's not going to be sheepable, I believe, because you're not applying any debuffs, so that's great. And then increasing the cooldown of all enemy skills, so lockout, which is what makes champions like Yumiko, Warlord. Who else can we add in there? Maybe not directly in that essence, but like maybe Basher, for example. All my homies love Basher. That's actually a great contribution to it. More lockout, though, with extra strips. This champion is meta. This champion has become meta easily. And we haven't even got done with their kit. Of course, you can metamorph, which means we're going to take a look at her alternative form. But let's look at her passive. Immune to stun debuffs. W. Uko stonks down when it comes to stun set. Who else do we have that likes to do a lot of stunning? I know Staltis has a stun that's AoE based. Yo, that's actually really good. Increases champions' accuracy by 1 for every 2 resistance they have. So you can scale into resistance and gain efficiency and accuracy. These type of like building into one stat and gain aspects in another is tremendously valuable. Tremendously valuable. That's huge. That's huge. I feel that's very interesting. I would say that, like, being able to survive in an environment when you're in a very CC heavy environment would be good. That's where resistance value is at. And then being able to apply debuffs and whatnot because you're benefiting from that resistance is huge. And then, of course, our ally resist in all battles is by 80% or 80. That's actually great right there, too, as well, for resistance-based battles. Although I would probably see a lot of people use different auras in there. So that's a solid champion. I like the way that this guy looks already. This is a very, very cool champion. If I interpreted this cooldown accurately, it also increases the cooldown of all enemy skills by 3 turns. If this requires the enemy's cooldowns to automatically be up and used already, then the value goes down a little bit. But if it is a one that automatically just takes, even if they're not on cooldown, and it applies a 3-turn CD on it, that's big stunks. I would say that if it isn't, this is a champion that's on par with strippers. If it does go the way that I'm thinking or I'm interpreting it, then this champion is above strippers and lockout champions because it does both of them. It's superior in that aspect. And there's no failure because you don't have to, do anything. You're just playing the accuracy resistance battle, which is why the book says increase resistance. That's a solid aspect. Even if it was the other one, I think that's still very solid because you're going to be able to do a lot with this champion as a result of it. That's really, really cool. All right, let's see the alternate form. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of decreasing the duration of all debuffs on a random ally by 1 turn. Each hit, so 2 hits, 50% chance. That can get booked up to a 60% chance. A pseudo cleanse, not too bad. Not crazy substantial, but it's nice to be able to give your champion a chance to get back into the fight. Reign of Damnation. Man, these names are really cool. Attacks all enemies. Places a block, debuffs, and a 50% increase resistant buff on all allies for 2 turns. Great. Then fills the turn meter of all allies by 20%. Great. And then it's on a 4-turn cooldown that can be booked down to a 3-turn cooldown. Great. We like Reign of Damnation. Solid. Turn meter boost, block debuff, and increase resistance. All great in one ability. Night Purge. Removes all debuffs from all allies, then increases the cooldown of all ally skills except this champion's by 3 turns. A resetter too? Removes all debuffs, a cleanser, then decreases the cooldown of all ally skills except this champion's by 3 turns. A resetter? Oh my god, on a 6-turn cooldown that can be booked down to a 5-turn cooldown. This champion is solid. Just that alone is solid. A cleanser and a resetter. A lot of times when you're playing against enemies like Krok'mar, who's one of the more well-known resetters, this champion can do the reset, but if they're controlled, then they're resetting and they lose their skill and their turn and they have to wait for the next turn to be able to activate it. Well, forget that. You're going to get your skills by 3 turns reset, and then you're going to be able to go because you're going to get cleansed off of it. Yo, Night Queen Acrixia stands true to her name. Queen! Let's go. I haven't even talked about the passive yet for this one. Immune to sleep debuffs. Who do you know that sleeps? Let's talk about it. Siffy. Increases this champion's speed by 1 for every 10 resistance they have. Stacks up to 50. Another passive that gives you speed. One of the best stats in the game by 1 point for every 10 resistance. So the moment you get to a certain resistance amount, your speed is also jumped up. That is tremendously valuable. And then, of course, the aura still increases resistance to all allies. I'm going to be honest with you. Night Queen Acrixia is going to be a problem. Is it Crixia or Crixia? Y'all let me know what y'all think. The Night Queen is coming, and I'm not ready for it. Yo, anybody want to give me some primal shards real quick? Hold up. No, I think these are all solid champions. I think for the most part, every single one of them has something unique. The uncommons stand true to being uncommon value. I think the voids and the legendary aspect behind a lot of these champions all stand true to it. I have to admit, I do like the timid synergy with Kaj the Rai. I think that could have some really good value, particularly in like tag team arena, where you have to use more than just your staple 4, your premier 4. You may have like second premier, and this champion with Kaja could be really, really cool to see. I think people might be sleeping on the synergy between Kaja and Timid, which makes Timid a lot more valuable. And then, of course, the epics, they provide a lot of substance to a faction that does need desperately some more support. So really, 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 really good implementation of champions. I think this is a W. Out of all the champions, which ones do you want to get your hands on? Let me know in the comments below. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. For me, it's going to be Night Queen, although it's a mythic, so that's going to be a little bit of a hard one to acquire. But with that being said, hey, never say never. You never know what's in the future for you, right? With that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and always, always remember, stay ascended.